Hey everybody, welcome to episode 93. This one might be a hard pill to swallow for some people. I'm gonna go hardcore in here. Um, this is this subject matter is probably not very popular. I'm highly doubting that there is a what do you call it? A tag for it, a hashtag for it in or anywhere on the internet, because just trying to find images or a PDF or things of this stuff is very difficult. Now, I'm talking, of course, of I'm nicknaming it this, and again, this is by no means me being derogatory towards it. This is just actually I didn't even nickname it. This is something somebody else came up with a long time ago when we were younger. Was lame space art, and it referred to a specific type of 70s space art that we just always kept calling it lame space art. And of course, this ties into music because our love of albums like Journey album covers, the Escape album cover, Frontiers. Obviously, we just looked at Asia, Roger Dean, Rodney Matthews. It doesn't have to be space specific. I mean, it still could be fantasy art. I even throw like Frank Frazetta and Boris Vallejo into this mix. Ken Kelly as well with the Destroyer cover. As you saw in my one video on Micronauts, Ken Kelly did a lot of the artwork for the Micronauts toy packaging, which was really cool, by the way. But I call this, I use my friend's term for it, it's lame space art. But the thing is, I absolutely love it. And it's one of those things like when you see it, you instantly recognize like, oh, that is lame space art. But you love it, and it's weird. It's like this is kind of like the in my ninja video, and I was talking about like Shokosuki and all the ninja movies. There's certain things out there that are so lame and so contrived and so like I guess lame is the best example. I mean, bad. This is why people watch movies that are horribly bad movies like Mystery Science Theater, or Riff Tracks, and they watch the movies, and they watch them, but they watch them out of a love for them as well. At least I'd like to think that with those guys. We did that with our Panic movies back in the day, and I specifically had a caveat every time we picked a movie. I said, I can't just go into a bad movie that I can't watch, because I just can't watch it. I have to actually like the movie, and I bring up all kinds of bad, schlock movies from the 80s and 70s, but the thing is, I actually like the movie for what it is, whether it's got a lot of TNA in it, whether it's just totally absurd that it just makes me chuckle. It's the same thing with this. I mean, there's artwork that's so like, oh my God, what is that? Right? It's just so over the top and absurd, but I love it. I just absolutely love it. It's so ugly, I love it. And I think it harkens to it's a artistic movement people may or may not be familiar with called brutalism. Brutalism is like the beauty and ugliness. You look at a building, a brutalist architecture. Of course, brutalism came out of Russia. Where else would it come from? But anyways, it's just this harsh, dystopian, just absolutely ugly thing. But it has such a beauty to it that it's just you can't stop looking at it. It's mesmerizing, and I find that way with the lame space art, as we call it. So I'm going to give you my history on how I kind of got into this, and this is before I even called it lame. Like I said, early 90s, we kind of coined the phrase lame space art. But for me, I really couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew I loved it, and I had loved it ever since going back to remember the days of Dungeons and Dragons. I told you in my video where I was going to the Rochester Hills Public Library, or actually just Rochester Public Library, the old one, and going through the science fiction section, going through every time I just see something, it would just stand out to me, along with the Dungeons and Dragons stuff. And I just loved going to the library as a kid at that time. I just absolutely loved it. It was just like it was better than Toys R Us. Well, It wasn't better than Toys R Us, but it was pretty close to being better than Toys R Us. It was like my home away from home, along with, like I said, Rochester Public Library no longer exists. They have a new library. It's okay. It's great. It's nice. It's bigger, but it doesn't have the same charm that the old one had, and it's not what I remember. So to me, it's gone. Kittyland, gone. Rochester Book Center, gone. All of these havens, these places where I just learned and discovered all this stuff, they're all gone. I keep saying this in every video. I keep quoting, Mad Max. It's all gone. It's all gone. But let's start out with something here. So this is actually, and I bought this solely on the reason of, not just the artwork, obviously, but I bought this book because this book used to be the librarian's desk at the Rochester Public Library. Her desk was here. There's a couple of them, but there was like one main librarian. I can't remember what her name was. But her desk was here, and then books behind her. I think it was fiction books behind her. I just remember going all straight back from her desk. Empire Strikes Back, the novelization in paperback, was on a shelf just past her desk there. That audio-visual room where I'd watch like Ricky Tikki Tavi and A Wrinkle in Time on the film strips, that was over here in this like audio-visual room. There was a bunch of puppets and like really, like, I don't like just kids' books, because there was like, I don't know if you remember, it was called Monster in the Mailbox. There was a book I just remember sitting in that little, and I love that alcove there too. It was so nice. It was like, you had like this bench. You had benches, like padded benches, but like where like backrests, they're real comfortable with like pillows, and then you had bookshelves, and then only about maybe, almost about as high up from my, a little bit higher from my window here, was a window, and the thing is, that was the front of the building, so that window right out there led out to the sidewalk that you walk right on Walton, and it had this angled glass to it, right? So it had this angled glass. We're talking about brutalism here. This angled glass, and you could sit down there and you could read and look up. And I just remember, I loved being there when it was raining out, because the rain would hit that glass and run down, and then you had the street outside there. And I just loved sitting down there and looking. Well, I wasn't reading the books. I was looking through the books. But I just loved that area. That's all gone, there's some cool spots in the new library down there, but in our library, the Wirt Library, downtown Bay City, it's okay. I just don't have any attachment to it, because, I came here as well into my adulthood when I moved into this town. But that library I loved. And like I said, her desk was here. Right next to her desk, she had like an atlas map kind of thing that had like it was like a podium shelf that had like an angle to it. And it had an atlas book. There was an atlas up there. And then on top of the atlas always was sitting this book. And I don't know why exactly, but this book had sat there for the longest time. And it was a reference book, so you couldn't check it out. Because I asked her one time, I said, "Can I check that out?" And she says, "It's a reference book, you can't." And, but I was just sitting there, just like that. Imagine sitting on top of a big atlas book on this like pine wood, lacquered pine wood kind of case or shelf there right next to her desk, and then we just sit there. And I was just mesmerized by the cover because of the lame space art. It's a National Geographic book. So I went on Amazon about 10 years ago, and I was like, I've got to find all these books that are just in my brain that, I haven't seen in years. And at the time, that would have been, well, it's been 40 years today, so maybe 30 years. I haven't seen these books in 30 years, and it's like, I want these books. At least I just want to see them. You don't have to actually own them, but I want to see them. But if I could own them, great. And so I went online on Amazon, and I just looked up, and of course, third-party person, I saw the cover. I didn't know what it said something, it was something Universe, and then I found it's called Our Universe. It's a National Geographic book. And it's a big, thick, nice, this is a perfect copy. When it came, I was just blown away. It's like, is this brand new? It was just a perfect copy, and, and I've kept it in good shape for the last 10 years. But it was like $15, and I probably had free shipping at the time, maybe not, maybe it was $3.99 for shipping, but it was cheap. I don't think it was 15. I think it was like $15 total with shipping. And it just has, whoops, sorry, there's a poster that is with. That's not really that interesting of a poster, not really noteworthy, but inside of this book, as I probably destroy it now trying to put it on camera, because I can't find any PDFs of this. But I mean, just everything about this book, and these books back in the day, just like the graphic design of everything with the heavy blacks and white letters, all of this stuff feeds into what I love about just design today. And it's like in the beginnings, Sodom, or the sun gods in gamma rays, and basically tells like our universe, like, the different theories on how the universe was made. It talks about things like Stonehenge. It talks about people thinking the Earth's flat. It talks about the zodiac and, the astrological stuff. It just kind of goes into like all these different aspects of obviously human culture, not just, any particular country, but human culture in general, and our advancements and stuff, astronomy, space travel, jets, automobile. It just talks about everything, and it's kind of like this World of Tomorrow book. I mean, it has like these crazy places that I'd see, like, what is that? And where is that? And as a kid, I mean, this stuff fascinated me. So what are these? I didn't realize what these giant radio towers, which is so Blue Oyster Cult, by the way. Anyways, yeah, I just loved it. And I mean, there was like this. It talks about the planets. It goes into a little bit of everything. And then it talks about these. And here we go. So then starts talking about, prospective alien races that could exist on certain planets and certain biomes. And I loved this thing as a kid. Whatever this was, this floating bag, octopus-looking thing. And then there's one exploding back there. And then this little crazy guy over here, where is he? This little thing, whatever this is. Sorry, can't point. There we go, that thing. I mean, I just sat there and it's like, I can't check this out. I can't check it out. It's like, I just want to sit here. I just want to spend the whole evening just looking at this. You know what I mean? And of course, smelling I got to smell everything too. I would smell everything in the art library and thought it was crazy. But I loved that stuff, and it talks about alien races. And like I said, it just goes into all this science that I had no possible way, especially at the time, being like 8 or 9 years old, to understand what the hell they're talking about. But I just loved it. I mean, I loved all of it. It was just, I was a Star Wars kid, and anything space, talking all this stuff just fascinated me. It talks about Venus. It talks about when the telescopes and stuff. I remember the picture of this. I thought it was another creature as a kid. It was just some type of like a landing craft that they'd land on the surface there. It's funny, they're talking about the surface of Mars. I mean, this book is copyright, gotta be. And I'm seeing this stuff in like 1981, 1982, so what the hell is the copyright on it? 1980. So this book was brand new probably at the time. That's probably why they had it out there for the longest time. But no, it was just, it was one of those things like Dungeons and Dragons, or one of those, just like music in general, with getting into prog rock, getting into comic books. It was just one of those things, and this thing was just, just blew the roof off of it when I saw this stuff. I was just so fascinated with it, and it's funny how you're so fascinated by this stuff, and a lot of kids were back then, but how teachers and parents. I mean, my parents. I was told my parents I wanted to be an astronaut. This is when they were married, and back when Star Wars came out, and Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica. So I want to be an astronaut. Little did I didn't know what it takes to be an astronaut, and there's no way. I mean, even if I wasn't afraid of heights, and I wasn't afraid of just being burned alive, that's usually a pretty strong fear. There's no way I would have been smart enough, not with my grades and my intelligence. I couldn't have been smart enough to do any of this stuff. But I had the passion was there. It's funny that Mars rover, the old Mars. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. It's the surface of Mars. I thought this happened. What? the copy. Oh, 1980. Oh, Okay, so Viking 1 and Viking 2. See, I didn't realize they had a craft that landed on Mars prior to the one that's currently there. But apparently it did in 1980, the year this book was printed. Which is weird. And they got shots of Mars, It's just, that stuff is just... I mean, even the science end of it, which, obviously I probably could have done more. Of course, there's probably at some points I wouldn't have been able to take the heights. Because, science just always... There's something involved in science that's going to make you... one of your phobias is going to stand out, and science is going to... Especially if you're looking up like this stuff, you're gonna have to deal with heights. So you have to climb a giant telescope, to get, or a giant radio tower up scaffolding or something at some point. It's like I'm gonna be like, ain't doing that. Or you're gonna have to swim in the ocean and scuba dive underneath giant ships. Another big fear of mine. But all of this stuff I just love. So anyways, so I had to have this book regardless. And now as an adult looking through it, I haven't really read it. I should at some point go through and read it. But just looking through it just brings back... I mean, I could smell the library now. I mean, this book doesn't smell like the library, but I mean, all of the senses that I had and being in that library, they all come alive when I see books like this. Now another book, and this one you could check out. I got some weird things, some kind of Mandela effects about it, which I guess there isn't really a Mandela effect. There's an obvious explanation to it, but I was upstairs in the adult section, where the grown-ups are, and they had a book sitting on a shelf. Again, I find a lot of these books just either laying on a table that somebody left there, or up on a shelf or something, or they put something on display. And I come along across this book here, Futuropolis. And I fell in love with this book. I mean, this would have been around the same time, say 1980, 81, and I'll tell you why that kind of, it plays into that. So I was there, and I said, oh, can I check this book? Yeah, I can check that book out. Oh, I'm just checking it out. And essentially, it's funny, even until I became adult, from the time I checked this out probably 10, 15 times. And I don't know how many times. I can just remember sitting on the carpet in the old house on the living room floor, and I had a bunch of paper and markers and stuff, and I was just trying to draw the ship. There's this giant ship just like coming out of another giant ship, and it had like a big glass dome, which was a city on it. And again, I didn't really... I mean, I got that, but in this orangey kind of like reds and orange colored ships, oh god, whenever I saw that, like like the Hatchet Fighter for Buck Rogers, it was kind of that orangey brick color, red color, and I would see that, like, it was like, I would call it like the Mars color. It's like I'd see like ships and stuff. I think Nell from Battle Beyond the Stars, there's a video I need to do. Battle Beyond the Stars had that same color to it, that kind of orangish red. I just love that, and that ship kind of had that same look to it. And a cast against all that black with that stark white lettering. I mean, you can see by my thumbnails, I really love the stark white and black lettering. Yeah, I checked this book out, and like I said, I learned so much about so many things from the book, and I didn't even realize until I was an adult, when I finally bought it off Amazon, and I got it, and I looked at it, and like, yep, that's the book. First thing off, I was like, why is the book so small? It's like, this is a first printing. In 1978, this thing was printed, and that's what they had in the library. This book's tiny, right? It was softcover, same book, exact same book. I'm like, why is the book so tiny? It's so small, it's so thin. It's because I had 8-year-old hands. It's like, of course. I was like, what is this, a Mandela effect? Was it really small, bigger when I was a kid? No, I was a tiny kid. So this book was a giant compared to me back then, I mean, albums, 12-inch albums were enormous to me as a kid. I don't have 8-year-old hands anymore, So, like I said, I absolutely love this, but I didn't realize until I got it as an adult that it's about future cities of the future. Hence the name Futuropolis, Metropolis, the future, Futuropolis. That's how dumb of a kid I was. I didn't understand that. Oh, it just sounds cool, Futuropolis. Do you even know what a metropolis is? Do you know what the future is? Yeah. If you put them together, you get Futuropolis, future city. Does that make any sense as a kid? No. But it looks cool. I love it. But yeah, so it's basically the whole book is about cities of the future. What if, it's kind of like a what if book, and they had like all these crazy, like, there are some real things in there that, it's like, they put this plastic over all these shipping containers so they could store it out in the forest or the jungle and stuff. It's like, this is like domed cities. It's like, and I loved this. I saw this art. There's a book where the sidewalk ends. Is that what it's called? It looked very similar to the art. That was another book I couldn't read as a kid, but I liked the artwork for it. I got some pictures of these we can look at, but one of those things, the pictures that just grabbed my attention, and I don't want to get demonetized. Well, it's not very hard to see, but there was a book called High Rise, and it was about a high-rise apartment. As you can see, there's a girl, and she was showing her chest, and it was just like, as a kid, I was like, oh my goodness. It was like, it's like discovering Playboy. It's just like, what's that? And then as it kind of went on, I started to discover, and I loved this ship. Oh, God, did I love this space. I got a picture of that. I can show you a better picture of that, but I love this. I used to draw this spaceship, I don't know how many times. Just kept drawing it over and over again. Yeah, it had some crazy stuff in it. One thing that was kind of cool. It's funny. So they were also talking about like Logan's Run, like the model they built for Logan's Run of the future city. They was talking about this was considered a future city. Was that, I can't remember what the place is called in Egypt. There's the one city building, I can't remember what it's, that one like face, I can't remember what it's called. But that art right there, this one, oops, on this page, I loved this. I have seen that on a book cover. A lot of this stuff ended up on science fiction book covers. Some of it ended up on albums, especially a lot of prog rock and stuff, because it's nerd rock. Prog rock is basically science fiction nerds, music for science fiction nerds. So of course they're going to put a lot of lame space art, and that was my joke. I said, we got to have. I had a comic book back in the 90s that I did, and the one character, there were all these little aliens that would just show up, and they're constantly showing up to this record store. Because there was this really cute girl that worked at the record store, and so my one main character is always going in and trying to peruse and trying to impress her with how much knowledge he knew about really obscure albums. She could care less, right? But he was trying to impress her, and of course at the same time all these aliens would just come in all the time, and they would constantly be looking for lame space art. They wanted albums. They were like, well, you have records with lame space art, because they figured that lame space art somehow was the key to the secrets of the universe. So, yeah. So like I said, that's right when the phrase was coined, lame space art. I love that painting. This one here, of course. I loved that as a kid. Absolutely loved it. And of course, going through this book, I remember seeing a book. Here it is. I remember seeing a book right there, right? I was like, oh, it's the visual encyclopedia of science fiction, A through Z, and the A and the Z were like these lame space art, ships. And, I never saw it as a kid, but I was like, So I go on to, I'll hold my place here. I go on to Amazon. And sure as poop. There it is. Again, awesome condition. Got it for, I think it was like $8 or something. I thought it was pencil. The price was pencil. So it was like $8. And I went through it, and this literally is exactly what it is. A through Z. It's a encyclopedia of science fiction, starting off with, like, Jules Verne, The Time Machine, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, it talks about, all that journey to the center of the earth. It starts talking about all of these, the dawn of science fiction, and then it goes through, all the different writers, goes through a bunch of, all the pulp novels and all the pulp stuff, and of course a lot of that lame space art ended up on pulp books. So I would put the pulp art like even a step past lame space art. Lame space art had a certain sophistication to it. It was very 70s. It was very druggy. I mean, it was a lot of drug, a lot of high-ons and stuff would get high looking at lame space art, right? The pulp stuff wasn't really, pulp stuff was more cheesecake, like 50s science fiction, not 70s science fiction, And of course a lot of the, like Philip K. Dick, and so a lot of books were about, taking acid and, the whole Timothy Leary and all that, Stranger in a Strange Land, Robert Heinlein stuff. It's all a lot of drug culture involved in that stuff, And what do you do when you're a science fiction geek, right? You can't get the girl at the record store, so what's the second best thing? Get high out of your fucking mind, right? It's the only way to combat loneliness because, EB girl is run off with some other douchebag from Hootie and the Blowfish, It's the 90s, sorry. That ship. Where was that ship there? Love that ship. Love this artwork. And they're talking about, spaceships and star drives and, it just gives you, like, all of the quintessential tropes of science fiction throughout the dawn of science fiction. And it's funny because this book was from 1978, so of course, what do you think the last entry is in the book? For the most part. I mean, it kind of goes on, but basically the height of science fiction at the time when this book was published, what do you think it was? Of course, it was, where do they talk about it? Or they say, like, the future of science fiction. They're like, when, right now, they talk about Star Trek, but of course it's Star Wars. I mean, there's Tom Baker, Doctor Who. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff was that time, but there was, like, the end of this book is Star Wars. Think about how much science fiction has come since Star Wars and what Star Wars has spawned since it came out in 77, right? So this book is up until that. So they need to come out with a second book. And essentially, you know what the second book is? I did a video on it. It's Starlog Magazine and Heavy Metal Magazine, which also I learned of not just by seeing a picture or seeing a magazine at Rochester Book Center, but there was an entry in here, and I can't find the page, but they mentioned Heavy Metal Magazine in here, and of course, I was glued, and I'm eventually going to do a Heavy Metal Magazine video here, but I love these artwork. Now this is Drew. Is it Juliet? I think that's how you say his name. Yeah, Philippe Juliet or Philippe Juliet. I love this. I love that. He was an artist, comic book artist, graphic. He was a French guy. I think he's French. Juliet sounds French. And he was doing stuff for Martel and what do you call it? Heavy metal at the time. Like I said, there's a great series. I should do another video on this. It's called Talk Untalk, which is like this German, black and white German TV art program that was on. They would get like 3 artists, and then they would just talk, and then they would just draw all together, and they draw on the same sheet. One guy would take over to the other one. There's stuff like all of them were on there. Moebius, Juliet, Bernie Hogarth was on there. Neil Adams is on there. What's his name? Kubert. Joe Kubert was on there. All of these classic masters, in their prime, they were all on this show. And of course, when you learn about heavy metal through like books like this and getting heavy metal, I can't show this picture because it'll get me non-monetized if I ever get monetized. Which, by the way, I'm going to segue into. Come on, guys, help me out. Get subscribed. Even if you hate my channel, if you just want to help a brother out, just subscribe. You don't have to love it. just subscribe and help me out. More of Drew Liet's art. So he had these crazy comics, and I've seen his comics since then, obviously, because I've learned about him and what's his face, Moebius, and and all the Arzak and Airtight Garage and all this stuff. I just love that. It was by the crazy artist. I think it is the same artist that did Where the Sidewalk Ends, but this crazy giant city on tank wheels, and of course that made me think as a kid, got to get go up and get some Manila paper. Hey, Gorilla, we in Manila. I didn't understand why they called it Manila paper. I think they still call it Manila paper. Does it come from Manila? I thought it was called vanilla paper because it was vaguely off-white, and I associate vanilla with vaguely off-white. But it's called Manila paper, so it was because the paper is pressed in Manila. I just remember the teachers, they always had a big box of it up there in elementary school. Oh, Jeff, you need some paper? There's a whole ream of Manila paper up there. I love Manila paper. Manila, then you know what they also had, which was like two of the greatest things combined: Manila paper and graph paper. They had Manila graph paper. Oh, that stuff was the best. So that was better than acid to me as a kid. It was Manila graph paper. Stuff like crack to me. But anyways, like I said, this is 1980-ish when I discovered this book, and I'm trying to get to it. There was something. Oh, there's a great picture there. Analog Magazine is another magazine that the only thing I didn't like about Analog Magazine, it was always sitting there. They had Asimov Magazine and Analog Magazine. They're always sitting there right next to Starlog and Dragon Magazine, and Heavy Metal was usually locked away, but you'd be sitting there going like, oh, that's so cool because I have these covers on it. And then you grab the book and it's like, oh, it's all words. You gotta read this? That's what I hated about novels. It's like, oh, look at all these cool science fiction covers. I love all this artwork. What am I going to do with it? I can't read, so I didn't read it, And granted, like I said, once I realized I could read, it was more like a self-awakening to me. I realized, it in my early adulthood, you know what, idiot? You actually can read, but I just didn't want to read it. Well, I really couldn't when I was young. But I mean, it eventually caught on, and despite me trying to fight it, I eventually ended up figuring out how to read, and then, like I said, somewhere in like my 19, 20 years old, I was like, oh my God, I actually can read, and I just started reading everything that I saw. I grabbed everything, Dune, science fiction. Oh, I just went nuts. Just went apeshit, just reading everything I possibly could. So we're getting there. So there's this thing called, I remember this. I showed my dad this picture. He's like, oh, it looks like the monorail from Disney World. And I was like, a what? A what and a what? He's like, yeah. And then I turned the page. Disney World? What are you talking about? And this wasn't the place that freaked me out. And this wasn't the place, like I said, I think I went over this in one of the other videos, but this wasn't specifically the building. But we did go through it, so we didn't stay there because obviously my dad wasn't going to pay that kind of money for a hotel there. And I don't, as an adult today, I could never make it because you get off the monorail there and it's like the mall, like that giant mall in Dallas, Texas. It's like, 15-story straight up, and all the rooms are on the sides, and you got to walk up there, and you got 15 stories. Like, I can't go to Disney World today. My dad was deathly afraid of heights. I'm surprised my dad and I even got on the monorail. I'm surprised my dad and I made it in one of those buckets that would take you across. I mean, I was scared shitless when I was a kid, and I just look at my dad. My dad just had this look on his face. He did not want to be up there. But the monorail didn't really bother me because you were enclosed. It's almost like being in like a train, and it's like, well, it is a train, but so even when it went over the water, and you're probably 50 feet off the ground, 40, 50 feet off the ground, or off the water, it didn't bother me. I was just more fascinated. This whole book, I was just like, I'm on a monorail, sorry. But that building, holy shit! I saw that building. It's like, Dad, it's the building from the book. I was like flipping out. And it's like in the monorail. We stopped to let people off, but we didn't get off the monorail because we're continuing into the park. But we went through it. And I was just dumbfounded. I mean, it was 1981. I know that for a fact. It was the year. The reason my dad and me went down to Florida with my Uncle Bob was to to pick up his wife Diane and his stepdaughter Denise, because they were at her parents in some trailer park somewhere down there in Florida. But but we wanted to make a thing out of it. So, and my mom and my dad were constantly fighting at this time. So my mom wanted my dad out of the house, and my dad's like, well, screw it, I'm just gonna go with my brother and take my son and go down to Florida and go to Disney World. My dad always wanted to go to Disney World, never gone to Disney World. Disney World, 1981. Disney World, was only from like 71, 72. I think Disney World's as old as I am, pretty much ish. I mean, maybe it's from the 60s. I can't remember. I thought Disney World was only from the 70s, but so we went there. So like I said, this book's got a special spot because of that time. And that crazy building. Some art museum building or whatever. It flipped me out as a kid. I had to look it up to find out what that was. I talked about this probably yesterday's videos. I didn't have the internet back then. So when you saw something that caught your eye, you were like, holy shit. You're like, I want to learn more about that. The only way to do it is to go to the library. And then hope the librarian could help you with whatever stupid question you'll type into Google. You had to present it to a librarian. And she's like, what? Let me grab something real quick. I just want to show you something. I went right to it. So as a kid, remember this book came out, I had this book in 1980. I never owned it then. I just kept checking it out. But there's this picture back here, right? This naked alien man or whatever, right? See the purples and the blues and his head, right? So anyways, once I got into Rush, you know where this is going if you know Rush. I'm like, this came out, I was like, what the hell? Is that from that book? I swear to God. It's just like it's the same, from Grace Under Pressure. Here, I'll show them to you side by side. It's just weird how you see these things and they just stand out. I mean, it's just weird. Like I said, that's what I love about art, and I love about, like I said, I'm not a bit, this is still illustration. I don't like art for art's sense. I mean, I don't like classical art. I had to study fine art and stuff. I'm not really into fine art. I mean, it's okay. Some of it's okay. At the end of the day, I'm just kind of like, it just turns me off. But all of this stuff, especially in the 70s, all that fantasy illustration and lame space art, all that type of art really speaks to me because, obviously from who I am and from the childhood that I had, all this stuff really speaks to me. I think they showed a picture of Heavy Metal Magazine in here at one point. I know they did. Or maybe they mentioned it in the Juliet section. I thought they had a picture of one of the covers of Heavy Metal Magazine. When they're talking about different books. But anyways, so that's Futuropolis. I said I'll probably put that one in my thumbnail. Just so you can see, because you might not have been able to see it very well. There it is. So I couldn't find a lot of pictures, but I'll also show you stuff like this. So this was I totally blanking on the artist's name, but this image down here was exactly that. It was a lame space art, right? And they just flipped it around and did something with the coloring, ran it through a filter or however they did that. And that's how the album cover Cultosaurus erectus, came to be. So obviously, when Blue Oyster, that's the thing I associate. I mean, Journey, sure. I mean, Journey in Asia, they've got Roger Dean covers, and well, Journey's got, I can't remember the artist that does the Journey stuff, but that's, to me, that's lame space art. And when you think of lame space art, I think of Journey album covers or Asia. However, the band that I associate the most with, obviously, lame space art, it's because of Heavy Metal the movie and Heavy Metal soundtrack, is Blue Oyster Cult. And Blue Oyster Cult is lame space art incarnate. But there's just, if you want to see a better cover picture, that's probably what I'll use this one for the what do you call it, thumbnail. I'm probably going to title it Lame Space Art or whatever. Like I said, nobody's going to watch this one. This will be like I'm surprised nobody saw nobody really watched my Boris Vallejo video. Does anybody not know who that is? Or maybe it's just because I had a bad, I'll have to come up with a better thumbnail for it, but it's an older video now, and nobody seems to go in my back catalog, but I'm just surprised nobody really, if I did a Frazetta video, I mean, how influential, everybody that I talk about, all these artists, they'll all talk about Frazetta, right? And it's just weird how that is like so well known in, like you go to a comic book convention, you ask 80% of the people who were above, who were born before 1981, if you asked all those people, Boris Vallejo, they just go, oh, God, they just go into, or sorry, Frank Frazetta, they just go into how much they love the guy and how much they love his art, and how influential it was. But you go on YouTube now, and if you put Frank Frazetta as a hashtag, it would probably come up with like 5,000 people have used it. Just like, really? I'm getting kind of irritated and getting kind of, I feel a sense of dread the older I get now, and as I keep just discovering things and how many things that it's just like everything closing down or being gone. There's so many things that I'm so ensconced in, and so just loved with utter passion, and I just assumed, because I would talk to like-minded people, it's how I met friends, was their love of the same thing, right? And I would talk to random people at whatever, and they'd go off and stuff like that, and realize like, wow, we are such a small blip when it just comes to the world, how nobody knows what the hell we're talking about half the time. I just find that amazing. I just find that absolutely amazing. I mean, you mentioned, like, Blue Oyster Cult, who? Cheap Trick, who? Frank Frazetta, who? It's like, are the millennial and zennial generations that far removed from us? Are they that far? I mean, seriously, are they that far removed that they've never even heard of it? Like, no clue what you're even talking about. I just find that mind-boggling. I find it absolutely mind-boggling and disheartening at the same time. Because I feel like, wow, it's just like most of the things that I loved through my life really don't really mean jack shit in the grand scheme of things, Here, I just grabbed some album or some science fiction book club. These are all Chris Foss. Here's Chris Foss here. He was a famous, he did like that, which of course they used for Jodorowsky's Dune. I think even Foss, was hired by Jodorowsky to do a lot of production design. But he had just crazy designs for stuff. This giant little funny looking robot, and it's got like the city. It's just grabbing these alien pod trees. It's just like, in this ocean. It's just there's that ship. I want to show you that. It just the imagination. And at that time, I mean, like I said, they're not going like today. I'd be like, oh, I'm going to design some crazy, you look at like modern production design and how polished it looks, and my other friend who does some production design, he has a name for modern production artists and dude bro art. It's dude bro art, and yes, I consider it to be dude bro art. A lot of it is just It's very tactical and very I don't know, just lame. When I say lame this time, I really literally mean it. It just seems lame. It's like there's like maybe one or two artists that actually had some talent, and everybody's just ripping them off. And I guess in some regards, there's no that kind of happened back then too. I mean, you had Frank Frazetta, Chris Foss. You had a very small amount of really, really, prolific and imaginative artists, and how many knockoffs, how many people ripped them off. I guess it's the same thing then. It's not like it's not like, oh, the generation now sucks because of this. They're doing the same thing that people have always done, you know. But but the old stuff though, those people, they didn't have anything. They didn't have any, maybe some old pulp covers from like the 50s or 60s, and they didn't really have a lot of stuff. I think a lot of it had to do with doing a lot of drugs. Which I don't think people sit around and just get blitzed out of their mind, and drop acid and smoke a lot of pot today. I mean, they do, but I don't think they do it specifically to inspire creativity. I think that's also why a lot of stuff nowadays just also seems like it doesn't have any balls to it. It's just, I think people should. I'm not trying to advocate for doing, illegal substances, although pot's not really illegal anymore. Pretty sure acid still is, but no, I mean, I think, psychedelic drugs and art kind of, seemed like it was a thing back in those days, and I don't think it's a thing as much anymore. I mean, I said, I know everybody's smoking pot. My whole freaking apartment complex is high 24/7. I can smell it coming through the heat vents all the time. But I don't. Is anybody using it to do anything creative, or are they just doing it just to fucking tap out? I think a lot of people are just doing it to tap out. Nobody's using it as a tool, And my small foray into the marijuana was specifically for that back in the 90s. I wanted to tap into some some inner creativity that I didn't know I had. It didn't really work, and I never really kept up with it. It's also it's just a pain in the ass. Alcohol doesn't really do it that much, but like anything that's psychotropic or anything that's psychedelic, that type of drugs, you would think you could tap into some kind of like inner creativity, and a lot of that stuff back then seemed to have that. But I don't know how. From what I see that's out there, it doesn't look like anybody does that anymore. Here's that building there. Let's see. I'm not going to grab the high-rise book because, like I said, it might get me demonetized. Whenever I get them, I keep saying, I sound like a broken record. More Chris Foss stuff. These are just some of the paintings that were in that book. Just wanted to kind of show them to you. All right, we're coming up on about 50 minutes here. So, I say closing thoughts. I guess I have been giving you my closing thoughts for the last few terms. Oh, let's go back to... I'm just going to pull it up. Let's go back to this. I should have pulled up some photos, and I forgot to. You people probably know what I'm talking about. So, and I probably talked about this in another video. So at the same trip, I went there with my dad. Went to Disney World, and we went to... after passing through this building, I was just like I said, my mind was blown. I'm on a monorail. I'm going through this crazy, Futuropolis. And once we got into the park there, I think the very first ride I wanted to go on was the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Again, that's not there anymore. And anyways, so we're walking by, and we had to go. We went kind of a weird way to get there. But there was that section, I can't remember what it's called. There's this building. It's got a name to it. There's this one building, and they got this, like, river, and there's these two spires. I don't know if you know what a spire is, but it's like this, like these, it's like sculpture-looking things. These two spires that were, like, they're probably like 30 feet high, maybe 40 feet high, and these spires right next to these buildings. I was just like, just looking at them like, and then they go down into the water, or I think they go down in the water, and I was just like, what are those? I was just staring at them. They were just, they were just burning themselves in my brain. And then we walked through there, and then I could see it up there ahead, because we had to get to the one ride I wanted to go through. I remember we had stopped because my dad, for some reason, flipped out when he saw Jiminy Cricket. Oh, there's Jiminy Cricket! He's some guy in a Jiminy Cricket costume. But anyways, we kept walking, and I see it up there, and it's Space Mountain, and I've heard, my sister, oh, you gotta go on Space Mountain, my Uncle Bob, oh, Space Mountain, the man on Disco Mountain, sorry, the man on the Silver Mountain. Anyway, so I'm looking at that, and I go, I'm just like, it's just, and the reason it burned itself in my brain was because it looked like, to me, and I probably mentioned this in the Star Wars videos, Bespin, right? 1980 was when, like I said, I didn't pay attention a lot to Empire because of all the stuff that was going on in the family at the time. However, I did pay attention to Bespin. Bespin really the Hoth and Bespin both really caught my attention. And the thing about Bespin that caught my attention were like Futuropolis, these floating cities, cloud cities, and they're, with all the different clouds and the different, the sunset colors reflecting off of it, and those spires all coming up out of, it went up like this, at the top, and then you've got all these different arrays and spires and buildings. And so when I saw that Space Mountain, on the horizon, rising up over the buildings, I just like, holy shit, what is that? And for some reason, there's two things, I probably talked about this before, I'll keep talking about it. Two things that totally, were mesmerized. Thinking about it later as an adult, because I was too scared to go on the ride, so I never went into Space Mountain. But I thought it was like flat, almost like the building you see there in the photograph. I thought it was like a flat kind of angled building. I didn't realize it was round until I saw pictures on the internet. I go, oh, it's actually a big circle. I didn't know that. Because when you're looking at something like that, it's just like this. So you just think to yourself, oh, it's flat, or a cube or rectangle. But the other thing was, and you can see it in this picture here. Although this picture does have I think it's like a grayish building. I can't remember what the color of that building is, that hotel is. But I could have sworn that the Space Mountain was this color, was like that, again, that rusty brick red kind of orangey color. And I looked online thinking, like, did they paint it? What going on? The one that we were in, and this is the one in Florida, in Orlando, it's always been white. They did paint the one in Disney World, or Disneyland in DC. They paint DC. California, they did paint it at one time, but then, or was the Space Mountain in France or whatever. They painted one of them, but then they painted it back to white. They painted it a very similar color that I was thinking of. But I checked and I looked at the history, and Space Mountain had never been painted. It was always white. So the only thing I can think of was that the time of the day, just like you can see in this building, is that the sunset, or the way the sun and the lighting from the sky, because it's a giant building and it's white, so it's gonna reflect, or it's gonna colors, is that the sky and the sunset made it look that color. And here's my little 8-year-old kid brain too, looking up at it. So that's the only thing I can think of that would happen. It's just that color has just somehow gotten into my head, and I keep thinking it was that. But it's one of those things I was just going scouring the internet looking for photos of Space Mountain. I still do it once in a while. It's one of those buildings that just totally mesmerized me as a kid. And it's funny reading or watching some documentaries too on Jack Kirby, and how when he went to the World's Fair in 1939 or 37, and that big ball with that tower and that little walkway, when he went to that, he said that that's what inspired him to create Kirby's Fourth World and create Metropolis. And it's just funny because, obviously I didn't turn into Kirby, but it's just, you see things like that as a kid, and if you're a creative child, and you're delusional basically. You you daydream, you do all that stuff. I think when you see that stuff as a child, it burns itself in your brain, and especially when it's sort of new to everybody else too, and you see that, it's just that stuff you can never get rid of it. I mean, it's always in there, and it kind of creates who you are. Um, I'm not the only one. There's probably thousands upon hundreds of thousands, of not millions of kids that have gone through Disney World at a young age and had seen those buildings and stuff, and it probably did the exact same thing to them as well. So I'm not like I'm unique or anything, but yeah, seeing that, and then I remember when we went on the Mickey Speedway. I remember my dad yelling at me about the banging the car back and forth on. You had to you followed the track, but the track kind of, if you just let go of the steering wheel, it would just steer itself. My dad kept getting mad at me. He's like, put your hands on the steering wheel and steer it so it doesn't have to keep banging back and forth every time it hits a turn. But as they were going on the ride, and I saw a video of somebody with like a GoPro or whatever, and he was on the ride, and it was the same angle. We're on the outside lane in those little cars, and you're on the ground pretty low too, and you're looking up, and we come around this corner, and boom, there it is, Space Mountain. And I swear that's when the sun caught it at just the right point to make it look like this reddish, brickish, orangey brown, with, like sunset colors. And then if you look at Bespin is that color, and that's probably why I said maybe Bespin from Empire Strikes Back is also playing itself on my brain in there, and I was just imagining it, but that whole thing. And the other thing I thought I could have sworn was, and I think this is because we were over by that building with the spires, I thought that Space Mountain, that there's people on top of the roof, right, and they're walking around and like those, coming out of those spires and then walking down the staircase down the side of it, but that's not what it was. I'm pretty sure what I was seeing was being over on that other building. It's got a name to it, this other building. I don't know if it's still there, but I know the spires are still there. And I think there's like a walkway, and I said there's a river there. I think there's a staircase too. And I think what I was seeing was the people walking and coming down that staircase. And because the spires look very similar to the ones on top of Space Mountain, that I just thought in my head, there's people walking out of the top of Space Mountain. And then I remember we split up from my uncle for a while, and I remember catching back up to him, and I said, hey, did you ever go into... He's like, yeah, we went to... Didn't you go to Space Mountain? I said, no. My dad didn't want to go on it either. So no, I didn't want to go into the building. He's like, oh, you should have checked it out. It was a lot of fun. So I never got to go on. I said I really had no interest in going on it. I just wanted to look at the building. But I wanted to, even though I probably couldn't have climbed that high, but I would have loved to have been, one of the people walking out of the top and walking down the side, which didn't happen either. But like I said, you're 8 years old, you've got, your head's just, you're constantly in awe, so a lot of different weird things were going, plus like I said, there's a lot of bad shit going on in the family at the time too, so, my mind had already developed a sense of like defense mechanism and like a sense of putting up barriers and blocking things out. So I don't know, like I said, maybe I had some kind of autistic spectrum back then. I don't think I do now, but maybe, I don't know, something might have, there's something also might have been going on there, more so than, that I know about. But yeah, like I said, that's kind of how all of that went down. Like I said, this is a real obscure video to play for people. Go back into my full screen here. But I just wanted to cover it, because I wanted to talk about it. And like I said, there's, also me recording these videos too is for me to like get down a lot of things that are in my head. So like when I start telling somebody a story, or somebody asks me a question, or you talk to somebody about it, it's like, hey, if you want to go watch the video on that. And like I said, because eventually I'm going to start getting older and start forgetting this stuff. So I'd like to have it on video of myself talking about it, so that I don't forget it either. I mean, there's lots of things that I just don't want to forget. I'd hate to get, my mom's got dementia right now, and I'd hate to, lose all of that stuff. I guess a lot of people with dementia, retain a lot of long-term memories. But there's probably going to be a point when my memory starts to go and I'll start forgetting all this stuff. As hyper focused and as hyper laser beam accurate as most of it, but there are holes. Like I said, there are holes in that laser beam memory. But maybe I won't forget. I don't know. Maybe I'll remember the stuff to the end. But we won't know until we get there. So again, these are just some of the books. I'd love to get some more. There were some books. And my friend also, he always brings up the Terran Trade Authority books. They were like his, what I'm talking about. That was his big foray into the lame space art. I knew of them, but those didn't really ring a bell when he even had a few and he showed it to me. He's like, yeah, the Terran Trade Authorities. I don't remember any of this. But there were these books they were at Kmart. Again, I remember walking around. My parents were together. My mom had a big stack of books, like in the middle of, nowhere, like the middle of the jewelry department. They just put these just giant stack of things that they're on sale, and there were these books, and they were like 99 cents or 80 cents, just cheap, and they're just stacks of different books. Kind of like when you go to Costco. When you go to Costco and there's just that big mountain of books with all these discount prices on it. It's kind of like that. They do that at Kmart. And one of the things were these books called World of Tomorrow books. I should have grabbed some pictures of them. They're called World of Tomorrow books, and they had one on future cities. They had one on weapons and armor. They had this cool black-looking floating hover tank thing on it. They had a whole series of them. I've seen them on thrift books. People want a lot for them. I mean, they're 80 cents back then. I don't want to pay much more than a few dollars for these books. I'm not going to pay $40 a book for an 80-cent book. And I didn't have all of them. I only had maybe 3 or 4 of them. Because my mom just grabbed a bunch of them and threw them in the cart. And I just remember I had them in my room, and they were just filled with that whole World of Tomorrow, building a better tomorrow. It's like science. I just remember being in Mr. Schultz's 7th grade science class at West Junior High. That would have been 1985, and getting the science book. I hated the class because I couldn't read, so therefore I couldn't, and I couldn't pay attention to where Mr. Schultz was. He's with the book in his hand, reading stuff off to the kids and telling the kids about science. He never even wrote any notes down on the board. He just blabbed the whole time, and then we'd have to read the book, and then he'd give it a test, and I failed every single one of the tests because I couldn't read. And so this is one of the reasons why it put me into special education. But anyways, but I love the book because it was like those. It's science. I mean, I just loved the idea of science, and I loved it. Just all of that stuff kind of just puts me in a certain mood and mindset when I see science things. I loved this. I took astronomy class in college. I just thought that was one of my favorite classes because the whole class. I'm just sitting there. Remember listening to the professor talk about the planets and stuff like that. I'm like going, this is all of the shit that I used to love as a kid, all right here. This is pretty crazy, and I can't keep my eyes off the girl in front of me. But anyways, yeah. So Mr. Schultz's class, like I said, I've seen on thrift books somebody had that science book that I had, and I kind of wanted it just because I wanted to go through and actually read it this time and understand it. I want to go back and read my 7th grade science book so I can actually understand science. But anyways, they had a bunch of pictures and stuff of just crazy looking things that are just again, I just look at the pictures. The pictures are burned into my brain. One was that ship. It's like a boat. It's a science vessel boat, and it was like a boat front to it, and then it would get to a certain point, and then it would do this, and then it was like a pole, and the very bottom of the pole would go all the way down to the bed of the floor of the ocean, and then that part would just stick out of the top of it, and so all of the stuff had to be built so up on side everything would be upright, but up until then it was like a boat, and then that top looks almost like a spade head sticking out of the water. To me, it's terrifying too when I think about it, just because of the megalophobia and the underwater in the ocean. That part's just terrifying to me. But at the same time, it's just so cool and fascinating. And they had like a whole thing on that in that science book, and I just love it. And again, it's all plays into this kind of brutalist, world of tomorrow, Futuropolis thing. So, all right, I think I babbled on long enough for this one. We've gone over an hour. All right, again, I apologize for the out of left field with this video. Like I said, it's probably going to get one view, mine, when I look at it. But like I said, I got some other stuff coming. I got a book coming that I want to do a video on, which also probably won't get much. It's me again doing my thing, and probably nobody's going to want to watch it. I guess still have to do some album ones. I need to get around to do those as well. But yeah, so all that stuff's coming up. So until then, I'm going to let you go, and I will see you on the next one. All right, bye-bye.